have to pick up on the phone?
Oh, you did. Oh,
He did.
well, I needed a good sermon.
I'll give you the afterwards. Oh. Thank you, Lee. You singing that song, you made me think of somebody. Alan McCroskey. Everybody remember Alan? Alan loved that song. Alan was one of our directors until he passed away. And he was so dedicated. He was a treasurer. And in the hospital, he was still trying to write checks and take care of the treasury. And I looked at him and I said, Alan, I think it's time to hire a CPA. He said, I do too. So anyway, Alan McCroskey was a great part of this ministry. One other person I couldn't get away without naming has been a big part of this ministry with Bonnie Bradford. I remember for years, in the Christmas choir, Bonnie played piano for us. She served on the board of directors. She was a financial secretary. She served as chairman for a while too. We missed those two greatly. And I know they're praising the Lord where they are now. And thank the Lord we have that confidence. Okay. What's wrong with this house? Well, this particular house was on the Outer Banks of North Carolina during Hurricane Isabel. Now, anybody knows anything about the Outer Banks? When you notice this house, it's on the beach side of Highway 12. If you want a house on the Outer Banks, don't put it on the beach side of Highway 12. All right? I know everybody wants to be there because you walk right out the door and onto the beach. But when the storms come, and the surf rises, and the wind blows, there's no foundation under those houses. And they fall because it's built on the sand. Right? Jesus teaches a similar story that's found in Matthew chapter 7, beginning at verse 24. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on a rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. We all know the story. The wise man that built his house on the rock, the foolish man that built his house on the sand. We all learned that song when we were in Sunday school as kids. The wise man built his house on the rock. Important little song, important little lesson that Jesus wants to teach us about what do we build on. And that's important. You know, we're thinking about climbing our ministries a lot today. We're also thinking about Lynchburg Church of Christ. We're also thinking about us as individuals. What do we build on? Now, Jesus went on to talk about that wise builder. That wise builder. And what is it that makes a wise builder? Well, look at verse 24. Everyone who hears my words and obeys them like a wise man who built his house on the rock. You catch the two things Jesus said? You have to hear and you have to act. You have to hear and you have to obey. That's a wise man. Someone who hears and obeys. That's what Jesus wants. James echoed the same thought. In James chapter 1, beginning at verse 22, It says, "Be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intensely at his natural face in the mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away, and at once forgets what he looks like. But the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing." So we can't just hear it, we have to act upon it. William Barclay, in his commentary on Matthew, says about this verse, "There's little point in going to a doctor unless we're prepared to do the things we hear him say." Well, isn't that true? What's the point in going to pay the doctor money if you're not going to listen to what he says? There are a lot of people that go pay the doctor money and still don't do what he says. The same thing is true in church. A lot of people come to hear what the great physician has to say. As we read his word and we talk about his word, we're hearing the words of the great physician. And yet people go out and act like they never heard any of it. Why is that? We need to hear and we need to obey. We need to act on what Jesus has told us to do. For Climbing Higher Ministries, we talked about it this morning in the 10 o'clock hour. This one verse rings out clear to us. Luke 14:21. "Go out to the highways and the byways and bring in the poor and the blind and the crippled and the lame." That verse is very clear. Go do it. We have to do it. That has been impressed in my mind and in my heart, that we have to go out and reach as many people as possible for the Lord. So what effect does a wise builder have on his house? Well, in Palestine, there were many sudden storms. The Jordan River would swell up out of its banks, and the building materials that they had in Bible times were not the greatest building materials in the world. And if they weren't careful, and if they were too close to the river, their houses would be destroyed. And so in the parallel passage to Matthew, the one in Luke 6:48 says, "He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when the flood arose, the stream broke against the house and could not shake it because it had been well built." Because the house, they dug deep and built the foundation on the rock. The word foundation is key here. There is no other foundation than Jesus Christ. He's the chief cornerstone. Jesus and the apostles make that foundation. And they give us the Word of God. And they teach us what to build on and how to go about doing God's work. We need that foundation. The great architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, was given the task of building this Imperial Hotel in Tokyo, Japan in 1923. He looked and he realized that underneath there was a lot of mud and shifting materials. And so he decided that he could indeed build his hotel on a solid foundation which he floated on that mud. So he made this really solid foundation, floated it on that mud, built the hotel. Now Tokyo is one of the most earthquake-prone cities in the United States. I mean, in the world, not the United States, of course, in the world. In the world. So, shortly after he built this hotel, one of the worst earthquakes Japan ever experienced happened. and the hotel stood. Buildings all around it, nowhere near as significant or, as large, fell. The hotel stood because he studied out where to put his foundation and how to build his foundation. This hotel also stood during World War II when the Americans were bombing Japan and most of Tokyo and the other cities in Japan were destroyed. This hotel stood because it was built on a solid foundation. It's not there any longer. They destroyed it to build something more modern and something even better. But that hotel was a testimony to an important foundation. And the same thing comes true with us in our relationship with Jesus. We've got to have that foundation. The wise builder studies the Word, listens to the Word, and applies it to life, and does something with it. It's not a matter of going to church on Sunday and forgetting all about it on Monday. It's applying it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and getting more on Sunday. The wise builder. But what about the foolish builder? What makes a foolish builder? Well, if making a wise builder someone who hears the Word and obeys the Word, a foolish builder would be somebody who hears the Word and does nothing about it. That's a foolish builder. They hear it, but they do nothing. Jesus said that kind of person is building on sand. The sand would be composed of human opinions, attitudes, and wills that are always shifting and unstable. The foolish builder is short-sighted and never gives thought to tomorrow. We can't approach the world this way. We've got to understand that foundation is important. And the foolish builder doesn't understand it. So in the parallel passage in Luke 6:49, Jesus said, "The one who hears and does not do them is like a man who built his house on the ground without a foundation. And when the stream broke against it, immediately it fell, and the ruin of that house was great." In October 1989, October 17th, many of you were probably watching the World Series at that time. And a great earthquake happened in the San Francisco area where the ball game was being played. Now that earthquake was quite devastating to that area. But the Golden Gate Bridge stood through the earthquake. You know why? Those two posts, two towers that support the bridge, go way down into the water, way down to where they found rock to build the foundation for that bridge. The earthquake came, the bridge stood. But over in Oakland, they had a double-decker highway. And remember watching that game, those of you who were watching that game, remember these pictures kept popping up all during that game. That double-decker highway fell. Why? Because the foundation that they used for that double-decker highway was built on top of land that was filled in. It wasn't solid. And when the ground shook, that highway fell and devastation happened to so many people. See, when we build on sand, the time of testing comes. I've never watched this. And the house will fall. You know, the sad thing is that you might build two houses that look alike, But when the storm comes, you'll find out the difference of the one that's built on a solid foundation and the one that's not. You'll find out the difference between the one built on the rock and the one built on the sand. Same thing is true in life. When those times of testing come, and they come, when they come, if you build on a solid foundation of Jesus Christ, okay, you can stand. It may be hard, but you can stand. You built on that foundation of the sand, which is no foundation at all, you're going to fall. You're going to fall. And it may be two Christians that look alike. They maybe go to church together every Sunday. They may sing all of the hymns. They may be around the Lord's table. But what's the difference in their life? Are they built on a rock? Or are they built on sand? That's important to know. It's 1174. Donano Pisiano, the Italian architect, was given the job of building a separate bell tower for the cathedral in the city of Pisa. So he built this tower that is 185 feet tall. It's about a separate tower. There was only one problem. The builders figured out that the ground was softer than what they thought in the beginning. Well, imagine that. Does anybody know what Pisa means? The name Pisa means marshy land. Wouldn't you think that'd be a hint that the ground's not very solid? Well, to top it off, they built a foundation 5 feet deep in the ground. Now, you're building a 185-foot tower on a foundation that's not on solid ground, only 5 feet in the ground. Well, we all know the story about the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It leans 18 feet from where it's supposed to be standing. And all architects and experts in building say it's going to continue to tilt, and continue to tilt until one day it's going to fall over. All because it didn't have the right foundation. So how good is your foundation? Is your foundation anchored on the rock? And that rock is Jesus Christ, the only foundation there is. Acts 4:12 says there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved. You need to anchor yourself in the rock, Jesus Christ, if you're not already. If you're here this morning, you have a decision you need to make for Jesus. We're going to stand and sing Amazing Grace with My Chains. Let's stand. If you need to make a decision, come while we sing.